Experience the evolution of accuracy with the new Browning X-Bolt 2. Guys, this rifle is something else. With the introduction of the X-Bolt, Browning has set a new standard in the development of bolt-action rifles. It was created around the goal of total accuracy, where every component worked in unison to improve downrange performance straight out of the box, from windswept tundras to rocky peaks high above the tree line to African plains and everywhere in between. The X-Bolt delivered the tack-driving accuracy a Browning rifle is respected for. And that's super true, guys. I really like this rifle from a standpoint of, like, it's not super heavy, it's not super light. I put a really nice scope on it. I love that Veritech stock because that is like one of those pieces of accuracy that, that interface between the rifle and the shooter. Not everybody's the same size. The DLX trigger, you can get the plus magazine system for extra rounds. Great all-around rifle in the field. For those of you that are looking for a rifle this year to take to the field that you can feel real confident in and get really comfortable with, this is the rifle to check out. The Browning X-Bolt 2 should be one of your top contenders. Link is in the show notes. This whole dive into copper bullets has been fascinating for me, and you guys should check it out. Go to barnesbullets.com and have a look at the website and check out these bullets. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I found with them. But what they talk about is, like since 1989, they've been engineering the most technologically advanced hunting bullets and ammunition on the planet. And the more I shoot these suckers, the more I tend to believe it. They're manufactured here in the USA. In fact, their facility is down by my dad's ranch in central Utah. And what I've found is they really do create a little bit better penetration. They expand on impact, so the blood trails are quite a bit larger, and they do a little bit more damage, putting that animal down a little, faster. It's a way. In fact, on their website it says produce massive wound channels even in dense, thick-skinned game, and that is true. I found that to be true for sure. Check them out, and check out the episode I did with Barnes. So it's 191 with Mitch Cookson, and he gets into great detail about how these bullets are designed and why they're better. Definitely worth some consideration. Go to barnesbullets.com, have a look for yourself, make a decision, let me know what you think. See ya. There exists a threat, from anti-hunting groups to politicians trying to give our land away, and we won't stand for it. Those vast western landscapes provide the space for our wildlife to thrive, and a place for hunters and anglers to fuel the fire that sparks their soul. In this show, we share our love of hunting, fishing, and conservation. Here, we provide the foundation to meet these threats through passion and the grit of the American outdoorsman. Welcome to the Western Huntsman Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Western Huntsman Podcast. This is Jim Huntsman, your host, coming at you from the Broken Tine studio right here in Northwest Montana, and brought to you by Eastmans Hunting Journals. Guys, thanks for tuning in. We've got kind of an important topic. This is going to be like a last-minute episode we're throwing together, but if you remember a few weeks ago, I don't know, a month or two ago, I had Todd Helms on, who is the chief of a lot of things over at Eastman, specifically the editor-in-chief and the host of the Wingman podcast. And he is the guy that is in charge. When you see all those Eastman's articles come out on the blog and even the articles in the magazines and all that kind of stuff, Todd is behind all of that, whether he's actually writing them or he's editing them or he's approving them, and he's kind of putting all that content together, and that's kind of his job. And so he is the perfect guy to bring on because he's way up to speed on this topic. But we're going to be talking about this potential sell-off of up to like north of 3 million acres of public land that this Mike Lee fella that we've had some trouble with in the past out of Utah and the rest of the Utah delegation, if you will, coming after public land again. And so we're gonna be talking about that because, guys, I know some of you may be getting a little bit burned out with seeing all the posts and seeing all the social media stuff and other podcasts. But the thing is, is I encourage you to listen to this and take some action, because once that land is gone, it's gone forever. There's no getting it back. And so I know that sometimes it's kind of like, our eyes start glazing over with this discussion of public land. It's the same with like conservation issues or, some of the other things that we talk about, but it's really important. It's this kind of thing is the reason why I got involved in the hunting space in the beginning of this show, to save the future of hunting. And part of saving the future of hunting is protecting the public land that we have, which is uniquely American. There's no other country outside of America and Canada in the world that offers the public land and the access that we enjoy as hunters and anglers and outdoorsmen, to go out there on our land and call that place home, if you will, and enjoy it and recreate and hunt and take some responsible resources off of that landscape as we manage the animals and the land. This management system that we have, the North American model, is super unique, and it's always at stake. When you have something great like this, somebody's always trying to come and take it, and that's kind of where we're at. So, Todd, thanks for bearing with my big long rant there. I don't even know if it made sense, man.
No, it's perfect, Jim. I when you reached out, 45 minutes ago, I was like, yeah, let's do it today. So it's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. I'm kind of in the middle of some things right now, but yeah, we are trying to pump out all the information that we possibly can about this at the moment, because it's obviously public lands are at stake, which means the future of Western big game hunting, Western hunting across the board, and recreation are completely at stake. And there's more than that. There's a thing that not a lot of folks are thinking about and talking about right now, and it's the animal wildlife welfare. I mean, when you start looking at selling off massive swaths of public land, 2.5 to 3 million acres, and the bill is proposing 50% to 75% of all public lands in the western states, with the exception of Montana. And you're looking at impacting migration corridors, millions of dollars worth of habitat that has been restored, worked on. I mean, some of the stuff that's on that map, Jim, falls right in the heart of core migration and sensitive habitat areas that we've been working our butts off with state agencies and federal agencies and everyday sportsmen and NGOs to safeguard and protect. Yeah. And all that stuff. And all that stuff
clarify, I just want to clarify.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if you said it. If you said it this way, but it's not less than 0.5% and not more than 0.75% of BLM, right. And that same breakdown, 0.05 to 0.75 of national forest,
right?
And so that's and guys, the way there's a great article that Eastman's put out. Who wrote this article, Todd?
So David Willms wrote this article for us. I had the pleasure of interviewing David on our big sage grouse project that we did a couple of years back, and he is the associate vice president for public lands. He's a senior director for the Western Wildlife and Conservation. He is a wealth of information. I'm not probably giving him his correct bona fides, but David is an absolute wealth of information. So we reached out to him, and we reached out to David. I'm pulling up my email right now.
He's like he served as a national resources policy advisor to Wyoming governor.
He's incredible.
I mean, he's got quite the resume there.
So he is the associate vice president of public lands for the National Wildlife Federation. He's also an adjunct professor at the University of Wyoming Hobbs School of Environment and Natural Resources, and he's kind of the man when it comes to this, and we couldn't think of anybody better to have write this, because he's incredibly knowledgeable, up to speed, and he's out there fighting the good fight to help protect this.
Well, what I like about this article that he wrote is for guys like you and I that we've been in this fight for a long time, we get pretty emotionally involved in this stuff. This is
hard not to.
I mean, I take it personal. It's like I feel like somebody's trying to take some acreage from my back lot on my personal property here. That's kind of how I feel. So we take this personal, and so it was nice to have this guy, David Willms, write this in a way that's not like I would have a tendency to get a little hyperbolic and emotionally charged writing an article like this, where he doesn't do that. He just kind of offers the facts and the repercussions of what a bill like this does. And that's what is important. And I want people listening to understand, like, if you don't read the article kind of it alludes to this, but when you're talking about 0.5, no less than 0.5% and no more than 0.75% of all Bureau of Land Management and National Forests, that on itself, that doesn't sound like a great deal of land. But the reality is it would be at least 2 million acres and as bad as just over 3 million acres. And when you put it into that kind of perspective, I like what the article says. You could sell every acre of Rhode Island and Delaware and still need to sell over 1 million acres to meet the mandate of this proposal. So that is a freaking lot of land that we're talking about.
Yeah, so, no, the maps that are out there floating around, there's been all different kinds of them. And the people pushing this legislation are saying that they're misinformation and they're being, miscategorized. It's misinformation. But I got news for them. If you're looking at no more than 0.75, I look at my friends to the east of where we live over in Sheridan, Wyoming, and they love the Bighorn Mountains, rightfully so. We live on the western side of them. I love them too. And you're looking at almost the entire Bighorn Mountain range, other than the wilderness areas that sits on the top. There are some exemptions to this, national monuments, national parks, historical markers like battlefields, and wilderness areas would be exempt from these sales. And it's like, that's all fine and dandy, but you're looking at all of the Bighorn National Forest potentially being for sale, privatized, gone. And Jim,
what would happen? What would happen if that land sells? Because the way that this Mike Lee is kind of trying to sell, which is pretty typical for these Utah folks. I don't know what it is with Republicans in Utah, but they're always like leading the charge to get rid of public land. It's been like that for I don't know how long, but a long time. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. I didn't mean to get off focus there, but I want people to understand fully what the consequences of this is. What happens, because they're trying to sell it as this, it's just, public land on the outskirts of, these communities to create better housing, as if they're swooping in to create some affordable housing for some folks that can't afford housing now, that in the housing that's already there. And if you, I'm sorry, but if you go to Utah, I bring this up because Mike Lee is a senator from Utah. If you go to Utah, you've got housing crawling every square inch of the Salt Lake Valley and up into like Ogden and south into Spanish Fork. It is one big, massive plot when there's still plenty of land there to build more housing. Like it's like a ludicrous argument. You can see I'm already getting fired up. I start like stuttering when I get mad.
The thing that's interesting to me about it, Jim, is you look at, for example, the national forest parcels that they're looking at, or the BLM parcels that would be up for sale theoretically up for sale in this. They're not, a lot of them aren't even suitable for habitation. You look at the Bighorn Mountains, for example, there's a large chunk of those, man, you can't even get to in the wintertime. Nobody's going to live up there. It's too far away from a town. Same thing with a lot of this BLM ground. It's too far outside of Las Vegas or Salt Lake. You're not going to live there. What's going to happen is you're going to get multinational corporations that are going to buy this stuff up, because the average human, the average American's not going to be able to afford to buy this stuff. And so it's just setting it up for massive amounts of land grabs. Because as I said a couple weeks ago on a podcast that Scott Reekers and I sat down and did, we have land transfer laws on the books already that date back to 1970s, I think 76.
I think so. I think you're right.
Yeah, and they established the ability to create land transfer where it's needed and when it's needed by looking at, okay, there's 2,000 acres outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, of Bureau of Land Management land that's sitting there and it's not being grazed. There's no mineral extraction or energy development happening on it. And so we want it for housing. It's like, okay, maybe that is the best use for that land, but there's a process set already. And so what I see with this stuff is it's an opportunity to divest the federal government of its federal land. And in this, it's kind of a backdoor guise. It's like, oh, we're going to balance the budget, which the money's not there in this to balance the budget. It's not even close.
Not even close. Yeah.
And the money going into the general fund of the Treasury is not the right move. And it's just hey, you're getting me fired up too, man. And it's not a good idea.
It's not. It sets a precedent. It sets a precedent for the long term, and it's the foundation that is going to get laid to build the house of getting rid of all public land over the next generation. And that's really what this is. And so there's a couple things that really bother me about the approach and how this was kind of even brought to the forefront. First of all, Mike Lee has always had this thing against public land, and he's not alone, but he's always had this thing with public land. And I think what really sticks in my crawl about it, Todd, is if you look at the world and the state of the country right now, we've got massive protests going on. Cities are burning down. We've got still high gas prices. Things are starting to stabilize, but we've got Israel and Iran going at it. We've got Ukraine and Russia going at it. We've got all these problems that are like supposedly supposed to be top of mind issues. Why are we even talking about in a bill to make life better for Americans? Why are we talking about selling public land or transferring it to the state? And for any of the naysayers out there, do not, because I have a post going out there on, I don't know, Facebook or something, and somebody's like, oh, well, the state would be better to manage it. It would be way better to just give it all to the state and let them manage it. Local control is always better than federal control. First of all, there's 2 points I want to make to that argument. You don't know what you're talking about because that's not how it works. All Western states, unless I'm making correct me if I'm wrong on this, but Todd, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Todd, but if all Western states have essentially a constitutional mandate that state-owned land has to generate revenue for things such as public schools, EMS, those types of things. They can't just hold on to it for you to recreate on. That has to be sold off or utilized in a way that generates revenue. And the best way for them to generate revenue is to sell it to people like the Wilks brothers. Right. And so there's that issue. Secondly, local control does not always equate better management. Listen, the last decade of my life prior to me starting my own roofing company was spent at a big, a giant roofing outfit out of Spokane, Washington, in which my job was to find government contracts for these giant commercial roof replacements. So we're talking 1 million square foot high schools and elementary schools and courthouses and all these local entities that are publicly owned entities. So I can tell you from firsthand experience, they don't manage those buildings any better than a federal building. Or the only people that manage their buildings appropriately, these big, large industrial or commercial outfits, are private entities. A private company is going to have like a warehouse, right? And they're a manufacturer of one example I have is one customer, they manufactured cardboard boxes. They need to make sure that roof doesn't leak, right? And so because water on cardboard is a bad combination. You think that roof leaked? Heck no, man. But do you know how many times I went into a high school and the roof was absolutely coming apart at the seams, water pouring into the building, creating mold and structural damage in between the structural framing of the roof to the ceiling inside the building, and ruining gym floors and hardwood floors and creating all sorts of mess, all because the school board couldn't get together and figure out how to prioritize spending a little bit of money on preventative maintenance. Don't tell me that local entities will manage this land better than federal, because I don't think either one of them manages it correctly. But the way that it is now, it works. Yes, it's not perfect, but it does work. And so this fantasy that the state is going to take over millions of acres of land and magically have all this money to manage it and provide you with the access to continue to hunt, fish, recreate, ride motorcycles, whatever, on that land, that is exactly all that is. It's an absolute fantasy. They don't have the funds, don't have the resources to manage it better than the federal government. The people that manage it now on the federal level are local people, so that doesn't even change. It's a fantasy. What say you, Todd? I took it over there.
No, you're good. You started to play devil's advocate with yourself right there for a minute, talking about privatization. But you're right. It's true. And, an interesting point to this is I was talking with my wife, and I were discussing this last night, and my oldest daughter was listening in, and we got talking about it. And I started to explain the idea of public lands. For example, I have family in Iowa. I'm not from there, but I have family there now. And when we go back, the only hunting we do, which we do a lot of it, is on private land, because that's where it is. Not a lot of public land in a place like Iowa. And my daughter brought up she said, well, maybe that's a good thing, because then they can control it better. And I said, that's one way of looking at it. And that's the way it's being looked at it from Senator Mike Lee and others. I think there's more to that agenda than that. But I also brought up the point where I told her, I said, okay, but in Wyoming, we enjoy the public land that we have, whether it's Bureau of Land Management, whether it's National Forest. I said, we get to recreate on it. We get to hunt, fish, hike, trap. We can do all kinds of fun stuff on it. And I said, at the same time, it could be developed. Some of that can be developed for energy. It can be logged selectively. It can raise money through cattle grazing allotments, which I think is interesting. Cattle, any BLM ground with cattle grazing on an allotment is exempt from these public sales. So that's an interesting point. The other side of this is this ground has to be sold at fair market value, Jim.
Yes.
Your states aren't going to be able to afford fair market value. They might be able to buy some, maybe some of the most sensitive pieces they might be able to buy, but they're not going to be able to afford to buy a lot of it. One of the other things in the language of the bill is to eliminate checkerboarding, to alleviate the checkerboarding issue, which we have here. That falls into the corner crossing debate. So you would get all of a sudden, corner crossing is now, for all intents and purposes, legal in the state of Wyoming. So then you get a rancher like the Elk Mountain Ranch down in Elk Mountain, where the corner crossing debate started. And he says, okay, well, I'm just going to buy everything that touches my ranch. And it's, then the corner crossing thing is a moot point. And so, I mean, don't get me wrong. I am all for private property rights. They're incredibly, incredibly important. But we also have a heritage of public land access in this country, like you alluded to earlier, like very few other places.
Uniquely American. Yep. And Todd, I want to clarify. I wasn't advocating in any way to privatize.
No,
at all. But it's hard to argue that privately owned land, just like privately owned entities, such as warehousing and distribution facilities and things of that nature, those are better managed than any kind of public entity. My point is just because it's a county, a local municipality, or a state does not equate to automatic better management than federal. It just doesn't. That's such a. I get kind of burned out with seeing this argument that, oh, well, the state's going to control it better. And man, go try to convince a local school district to take some of their money and spend it on their roof and tell me that they know how to manage money. They don't.
Right.
Just a local, and I don't mean to, offend anybody that's on a school board or anything, but they're an absolute mess. It's a mess. And so I just want to clarify that the management, in my opinion, and I want to get your take on this, Todd, because you hunt a lot of different country that I don't hunt, but I'm talking about the majority of my time on public land. Public land starts, I could throw a rock onto public land from my property, essentially, right? It's a national forest, starts right behind my house. It's filled with elk. In fact, one of my guiding clients shot an elk close enough that if he missed, that bullet could have hit my property, right? Up on the mountain behind me. He made a shot on an elk. And when we tracked that elk down, I called my wife and said, can you come and get me to drive us back to the top of the mountain where my truck is, instead of us hiking all the way back up there? And she came and got me. She was there within 3 or 4 minutes. I say that to highlight that I am, my life evolves around public land and public land hunting. And yes, I do have some access to some private, whether it's my stuff or the outfitter that I guide for has some access, right? So, but the majority of my hunting world and my fishing world, I was just fly fishing on Father's Day on public land, evolves around public land. And the point that I'm trying to make is everywhere where I hunt here, I don't see this big mismanagement thing going on.
Right.
Is there a call or a need for some of it to be better managed? Maybe some, better fire management, some better, whatever, fix the roads, things of that nature. But where I hunt, it's beautiful. It's beautiful country. It periodically catches on fire, which resets. Is not always a bad thing that the public land catches on fire. I mean, that's a natural. That's been going on since the dawn of time. But here's a good way to put it, Todd. When I go hunting on public land, my first thought or my second thought or even my 10th thought is never, oh man, I wish this forest was better managed so I can be here and have a better experience. It's not like that for me. What is it like? Like, do you go to public land in Wyoming, National Forest or BLM and think, boy, the first thing I need to think about here is how much better this land could be managed. It's just, for me, it's not a thing. Is that a thing for you?
It depends on where I'm at, Jim. In that, I would say the bulk of national forest land, other than we're starting to have massive amounts of beetle kill. And so the neglect of logging, they haven't done any active logging, hardly any, around me in a really long time. And it shows. We've got forests that are falling down, and that increases fire risk and fire and fuel load in these forests. So I do think there's
hotter. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there could be some definite more logging going on.
Back a couple months ago, I did an episode with Brandon Maddox, who is the founder and owner of Silencer Central. You should listen to that episode. It's episode 197. I love this company. I love this brand, and I love the American-made product that Silencer Central produces. I used the Banish 30 on my hunting rifle, and if you guys follow me on Instagram and you saw that video I put together, you'll see that it's not like what Hollywood portrays it as. It's not like it silences the rifle down into nothing. But it makes a huge difference. Like, my ears don't ring when I shoot. The animals don't know where the shot is coming from. It disorients the sound. And Silencer Central makes it super easy for you guys. Jump on to silencercentral.com and pick one out. You could ship your rifle to them. They'll thread your barrel. They'll ship it back. This is like a 10-day process. And the ATF process is shortened significantly. It's like down to 48 hours or less. It's the best time ever to get a silencer on your weapon, and you should check it out because it really is a game changer. SilencerCentral.com is where you could find them, or you can call 866-891-4494, and they're happy to answer questions. It's crazy. They actually have people that answer their phone. Again, guys, go to SilencerCentral.com. It's It's one of my favorite sponsors out there. These guys are just absolutely world-class with these world-class products, and I can't recommend putting a silencer on your hunting rifle enough. Save your ears, disorient the sound in case you need another shot. I mean, it's a game changer, folks. Check it out.
Where I see, I won't say mismanagement, but more like abuse of the resource is on Bureau of Land Management around where I live. There's a lot of BLM ground where I live, and a lot of it is lowland, not in the mountains. It's either used for, if it is developed, there's maybe some energy development on it, or it's got grazing allotments on it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what I see is not mismanagement, but abuse of the resource from John Q. Public. You know, there's a spot not far from here. You were talking about going out your back door and recreating, and we unfortunately live in town, is what it is. But we spend a lot of time, especially this time of year, doing evening rucks and different things out in the hills, and it's all Bureau of Land Management stuff. And the amount of trash that people just go and dump out there is sickening.
We do get that. Yeah,
is sickening. And
absolutely.
So I'm not going to call that mismanagement. I'm just going to call that abuse from the public, because it's like, come on, when you have a load of brush or an old car or refrigerator, take it to the dump. Spend $15.
We have places for that kind of stuff, and that kind of abuse, Todd, is it chaps my ass, because
it does too.
That is what when bureaucrats start sinking their teeth into like taking public land, they're going to use that as an example as to why it needs to be transferred to the state and sold for housing and blah blah blah. And what do you think of Mike Lee's comment? And like he put this reel on Instagram out, and he's like, "Oh, listen, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna transfer this land so that we can provide better housing." Like, what's your reaction to that specific comment? And do you think that is an obtainable goal that he's even talking about? That is, and is it even necessary?
I don't think it's an attainable goal, because we get back into looking at where these parcels would be sold. And granted, there's a whole vetting process that they've proposed and all this stuff about, you know, they have to talk to the governor and consult with the governor of the state. And he could say, no, that's not viable for public housing or whatever. But again, slippery slope, precedent set, right?
Yeah.
And I think getting back to who's going to be able to afford this at fair market value. And if you're looking at opening up some of the stuff here to our west, is gorgeous country, but it's really not habitable. And if it were, it's only going to be the top 1% of anybody, any public person, normal guy is not going to be able to afford it. So what you'd see in places like Jackson, for example, Jackson, Wyoming, where we're going to sell off some of this stuff. There's a bunch of it that's proposed. It's like they really want this hot springs area, and nobody's going to live there. But what's going to happen is it's a direct shot over to across the way to develop a ski hill.
Exactly. Yep.
And then pretty soon you get somebody that buys it all up, and they're putting condos in there. Or in the case of Sheridan, Wyoming, where these folks are going to buy up, if somebody could afford it, they'll buy it up, subdivide it, do whatever with it. Only certain people are going to be able to afford it. So then they may sell something down lower. So you're still ended up with, you're opening up more housing, but it's not necessarily affordable.
Yeah, it's not.
I just don't get it. I think it's a weak excuse for the opportunity to grab land, and if you look at,
it's a screen for another objective that is not clear.
That's how I see it too. And I can't say exactly what it is, I'm not even going to hint at it because I don't know. And so I'm not going to speak to that, but it's one of those deals where your average person's not going to be able to afford this land. Your states aren't going to be able to afford this land at fair market value. And so it's going to be bought up by multinational corporations or big groups. and they're going to lock it up, and then it's gone. And it's almost like Ryan Zinke, man, he hit the nail on the head. The former Secretary of the Interior and current congressman from Montana, who got Montana exempted from this and got this language stripped from the House version of the bill, which, by the way, if this does pass the Senate, it has to go back to the House. And so they are fighting an uphill battle with this, because they added the language that had been stripped back in, so it's got to go back to the House. So it's got to get voted on twice, basically. Like he said, it's an asset. This is an asset. And when you have an asset that's not being managed well, or it's not making money like it could be, you don't liquidate the asset. You figure out how to make it perform for you. So in this case, we need to open up logging. We need to look at responsible energy development. We need to look at great competitive grazing allotments and competitive grazing leases. So this land is making money for the federal government, and it's not just sitting there. Because as the Constitution originally set up, the federal government was not set up to be a landowner. But that's changed over time through forward-thinking visionaries like Theodore Roosevelt, who set up the national park system and the national monuments and the Forest Service and all of these different things, where it's kind of like, okay, that was a long time ago. Let's take a look at this. Instead of selling it all off, we need to look at how it's being managed, what we can do to manage it better, and not get rid of it. You don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and get rid of it. Back to the house scenario. If my roof starts leaking, I'm not going to sell the house. I'm going to put a new roof on it.
Yep.
You
should call me up, Todd. I'll come put a new roof on.
I'm going to fix it. Well, I will when it needs it.
I'll give you the friends and family discount, maybe.
There you go. I appreciate that. It's interesting, Jim. It's interesting.
Absolutely.
There's a lot going on. And is there misinformation coming from both sides of this debate? Sure there is. There's always misinformation. But I think that's why I love what the blog that we published and what David Willms wrote. When I was talking to him yesterday about writing this blog, I said, I want the facts. I want the facts of this, and so people can read it and make up their minds. And then I want how they can fight it. If they decide, you know what, this is something I can get behind. What do I do? And I want to get to that. I think I've messaged and called and emailed my senators and congressmen now, I don't know, half a dozen times on this. Yeah. It's gotten to the point where all three of mine have disabled comments on their social media pages. I get this. I've gotten, I won't say lame replies, because they're not lame. They're well thought out, but they're form replies to
I was going to say they're just like automated,
which I understand. I get that. I understand. But at the same time, if we don't say anything, if we don't get together and band together on this and just let it go by the wayside and without any opposition, then they don't have a voice to listen to.
And that's what they're hoping for. They're hoping to steamroll us. They're hoping to steamroll right over, like the hunting and angling community are the first ones to step up and start, kind of throwing a fit about this. But And to your point, before I forget, I want to go back to what you were saying, as to how these lands can go from public to some, international corporation owning them or whatever. That is not, like, Todd and I are not just speaking from, we're not guessing at this. We know that this is. So under the bill, in fact, David writes about this. The bill specifically states in it, and this is in the blog article here at Eastmans.com, on the blog.eastmans.com, blah, blah, blah. The term interested parties is undefined. Okay, that's kind of what it says. So in the bill, it says the Secretaries of Interior, BLM, and Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service can nominate lands for sale. However, the bill also allows quote unquote interested parties to nominate land. So think about this. you know how the Chinese Communist government owns these huge tracts of land in North America, in the United States specifically.
Right.
That could be an interested party.
Yes, it could.
So do you think if the Chinese government owns 500,000 acres in the Bighorn Mountains or something, are you going to be able to hunt that? You going to be able to fish that? Are your grandkids going to be able to enjoy access into those lands?
I would hope so, but probably not.
And what would be the motivation if all these lands were privatized, for example, or owned by some, entity that essentially disallowed public access for hunting, fishing, and recreating? What value does wildlife have at that point?
None. And
there is none.
So here's a part back to what I was saying earlier, Jim, about this is the part nobody's talking about. If this goes through and all of a sudden this recreational land, this public land, I keep calling it recreation, but states are mandated by their constitutions that this land has to make money, whether it's through energy leasing, whether it's through grazing allotments, timber
and the federal
sales.
Government does pay local entity governments.
Right.
I don't know if it's either a tax incentive or there is an actual check that is written
right
to account for what the lost revenue from local tax, property tax would be were that to be privately owned. I hope I.
Yeah, no, you nailed it.
Right.
But,
okay.
But back to the wildlife component, Jim, because that's, I mean, in all honesty, that's who really loses here. Mm-hmm. Because a big corporation or 50 different landowners that buy up little chunks of this aren't going to worry about whether or not those mule deer have a clear migration path.
Exactly.
They're not going to worry about that. And
because there's no value in it. There's no stakeholders.
Right. When you take away that value, you gut your game and fish agencies as well, because your tag sales and your revenue from tag sales, both resident and non-resident, are going to disappear, because there's no reason then for anybody to come to middle of nowhere Wyoming and spend money in a local economy for whether it's, foods or restaurants, bars, hotels, whatever, VR, Verbos, I mean, whatever it might be. So all of a sudden,
outfitters,
people aren't buying tags. So then state game and fish agencies' budgets are slashed even more than they already are. And so they're not managing wildlife. They're not worried about that, whether that mule deer and antelope migration corridor is intact. And pretty soon you have an already struggling deer herd in western Wyoming that can't migrate anymore. Or there's no projects to make sure that migration corridors are intact. You don't have game and fish biologists. And granted, I've complained just like everybody else about game and fish agencies across the board. They don't do it they don't do this right. They don't do that right. But I'll be real honest with you. In the case of the Wyoming Game and Fish Agency, they get a lot more right than they get wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They really, really, truly do.
Yeah, I agree.
They're local folks who live in your community that are trying to do a job because they're passionate about wildlife and the outdoors. A lot of them hunt, a lot of them fish, and they're your neighbors. Mm-hmm. You go to church with them. You buy gas next to them at the gas station. They're folks just like me and you. And all of a sudden, they don't have land to worry about. They don't have money because there's no tag sales. And so the wildlife are the ones that get hurt because they're the ones that fall through the cracks in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be said, we'll look at the model of Texas. Texas, for example, you go to Texas, there's no public land in Texas.
Mm-mm.
And I've hunted Texas 2 years in a row. And is the wildlife on the ranches that I hunted absolutely thriving? Yeah. You know why? Because there's money to be made, because that wildlife is still valuable.
Yep.
But I got news for you, Jim. Mule deer in Texas don't migrate like mule deer in Wyoming. And a lot of this stuff that they're looking at, these are people that are sitting in Washington, D.C. that, in my opinion, and again, opinions are like, buttholes. Everybody's got one and it usually stinks, right? But opinion, they're sitting there in Washington, D.C., and I don't think a lot of these folks have a real strong understanding of Western wildlife dynamics.
No,
I really don't.
They absolutely do not. And I can speak to that from the standpoint, Todd, of I was stationed in North Carolina for 5 years. In North Carolina, there is not a lot of public land. The tracts that are public, there is some kind of in western North Carolina against the border of Tennessee and all that. So granted, but the vast majority of North Carolina, when I lived there, here's the thing: I think there's somewhere around 8 or 9 million people that live in North Carolina, which is way more than in Montana, right? Hunting is a big deal for North Carolinians, but it's a very different concept.
Very different.
You have to be a landowner, or you have to be a part of a paid lease, or you have to be you have to buy into a hunting club. The nature of it is very different. They don't have Uncle Bob takes his nephew up the mountain to find a forked horn mule deer for the first time ever, for his first experience. The average person doesn't have access to these private tracts of land, and the small tracts of public land that do exist. Like I'm thinking of one for I used to hunt in the Croatan National Forest, and it sounds like this big place in North Carolina. It's not. You could drive from one end of that to the other in like 30 minutes,
right,
on a dirt road. And I mean, it is not. It is a small little piece. Like if you drive that far on Forest Service land here, you're just getting started, right? And you're just the tip of the iceberg there. So, and the same thing goes for Texas. So that money that you said is generated in Texas because of the hunting on those private ranches, that goes to that landowner, that goes to those ranches. Those are companies that are generating a revenue, a profit and revenue to put back into that private hunting ranch so that they could sell more hunts on that private ranch, right? That's not going to conservation. That's not going to wildlife biologists that work for the state fish and game agency, all that kind of stuff. But there are fees that come out of those. They pay to, as part of their business, to, the state game agencies. I'm sure that's somehow, I'm not real familiar with it, but it's not like Colorado or Utah or Wyoming or Montana or Idaho, where we have all this revenue that comes in for all these people that come and hunt public land that would be gone. That revenue would be gone. Millions and millions and millions of dollars would be gone, devaluing that wildlife and devaluing what would be anybody's motivation to come to Montana and get a deer elk combo rifle tag for that big 6-week season that we have every fall for rifle, and stay in, like what you were talking about, a hotel in, I don't know, throws outskirts of Missoula, Montana, to go hunt the mountains around there. That incentive would be gone. That revenue would be gone. And so I don't know. I got a little off course here, but
no, you're fine. You're fine, because if you look at the privatization model, like Texas or down south, and what I meant by that was, I'm not throwing Texas or those folks under the bus at all. They do a wonderful job of managing the wildlife that they have, but it's different. It's a different setup. Mm-hmm. Whitetails, by and large, do not migrate the way mule deer and antelope and elk, for that matter, migrate. And we're looking at vast tracts of undeveloped land that produce the strong. I mean, it's a vibrant, strong, thriving ecosystem that still works. It's still intact, and it's because we have these massive amounts of public land, undeveloped public land, that it's not just for recreation. It's not just for making money. So I don't know, it's interesting because, I think about growing up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan when I was a kid, and we had a lot of public land at our disposal. We had big, big, big national forests, but we also hunted an awful lot of privately held Mead Paper Company ground.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of that's not some American family anymore in a lot of instances, that, just, whatever. We can't patrol all of it, so let them hunt it, do whatever. a lot of those paper companies now are owned by other countries. And so
Exactly.
by default, other countries now own that land.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different world, I guess, is what I'm getting at, than it was in the 1980s and 1990s when I was growing up running around on that stuff. It's different now.
It's
And
just like agriculture and farming. Most of
right,
your farms out
right,
there are these big, giant international corporations,
right.
and it's not your mom and pop, Mr. Smith owning that alfalfa field over there anymore. It's not like that anymore.
Right.
And this just takes away from this genuinely beautiful thing that is Western hunting. Like people in the West don't go east very often to go hunt.
Well,
I love
it's a Western lifestyle, Jim.
the Western lifestyle.
It's a Western lifestyle, and it is a gem. Yeah,
Yep.
these landscapes are a gem that are, I mean, publicly owned, held in trust by the federal government, managed by federal agencies. And like you said earlier, do they get it perfect? No, they don't get it perfect. But is getting rid of them the answer? Not in my opinion.
Mm-mm.
Not
No,
by a
not
long
at all.
shot, man. I think the wildlife suffers. I think state economies will suffer. I think it's just not a great idea. Pretty soon we become Europe.
Exactly.
I got a buddy that's trying to come out. He's got plans to come out and do some fishing, and he lives in Georgia. And the only hunting he gets to do is on the hunt club that he's part of, and his days are restricted. I can't imagine he just doesn't have that level of freedom.
No.
And the fact that he can buy a deer tag or an antelope tag and come out west and hunt public ground, and that's opened up for him, or he can go fish in the national forest with me and his kids. And to think about that legacy being dismantled and sold off, it just turns my stomach.
It makes me sick, Todd. Can you imagine not having the ability? And I can, because I lived in North Carolina, right? And I'm not picking on North Carolina, but let's face it, there's just not a lot of public land there. And so it was shocking for a kid that grew up out west that I couldn't just throw a tent in the back of my truck and go miles into some national forest somewhere and get lost and hang out and fish the rivers and just do all this without paying a fee. You could pay a fee if you go to a campground or whatever, but I don't have to do that. I could go get on this dirt road behind my house and I could drive for 2 days and not see another human. I could set a tent up anywhere I want. If it's hunting season, I can have my $30 deer tag and I can go up there, go anywhere I want up there and find a deer and harvest that deer and bring it back. That literally some gas, whatever my tent cost, and a few groceries and a deer tag. That's what it costs. I don't have to pay. I remember in North Carolina, I used to hunt right on the edge in that Croatan National Forest. The only place I ever saw deer. In fact, I shot a whitetail. The first whitetail I ever killed was right there. Was because I was hunting right on the edge of this fence in the trees. And on the fence, it said Paradise Hunting Club or something like that. So I'd sit on one side of that fence on the public land side, and I'd wait for those guys to chase those deer onto the public land side. And that's how I got a buck. That's the only buck I got in North Carolina and that's how I did it. And it's the only way to do it because I didn't have access to those clubs. I was a 18, 19-year-old kid in the military making, gosh, what did they pay me back then? I remember my paychecks every 2 weeks only being like $200 or $300. You know what I mean? And so I certainly didn't have the money.
Well, and I think it's I there's that side of it. There's just so many things, and you and I've covered a lot of ground so far. And there's things that we haven't discussed. There's intricacies of this bill. But one of the biggest things that I want people to hear when they listen to this or when they read the blog or whatever it might be is contact your senators, contact your congressman and say, no, this is not a good idea. For whatever reason might be, this is not a good idea. Like I said earlier, I have my theories behind this. And
Yep, me too.
a lot of people think they're probably think they're out there, but I think in the grand scheme of things, the powers that be don't want you and I providing for ourselves. They don't want us hunting, trapping, fishing, having mobility. They want us to be kept.
Yeah, just
And
like the Europeans are.
that's
Just like the
that's
Europeans are.
exactly right.
And that is such a critical thing. You know, people pre-COVID may have said, "Oh, Jim and Todd, they're just a couple of conspiracy theorists." But I
Right.
think that now, on this side of like COVID and all that kind of, you know, shenanigans coming out of the government and whatnot, there's some credibility here. Some of the stuff that I thought was total conspiratorial 3, 4, 5 years ago, I was like, man, now that's not what's going on. It absolutely is what's going on. It absolutely was proven to be true. And now we're looking at this and we're thinking, boy, what would what would his motivation be to, with all the stuff out there going on in our country and around the world, to worry about public land as an institution that has been working for over a century now? What would be that guy's motivation to all of a sudden dip his toes and meddle with it? You know, like, it's not
Well,
just,
I
oh, I
think
want some affordable housing. Yeah,
yeah, no,
right. Give
I
me a
think
break.
it's bigger than him.
Yeah,
I think
I
it's
think it
bigger
is
than
too.
him, and
He's he's he's
he's
the
the
vehicle.
mouthpiece. He's
Yep,
the mouthpiece. I
he's the
think it's
vehicle.
bigger than him.
Yep.
Absolutely. And quite frankly, that's scary. That's scary to think about, scary to talk about. But you're right, man. We got to look behind the curtain at
Yep.
the great Oz a few years back, and it
Yeah.
was kind of like, whoa, wait a second. And so, yeah, I'm not going to dive off the deep end into conspiracy theories, but it's one of those things where I do think there's more to this than just we need to fix the budget, and
Yeah.
because it doesn't fix the budget.
It doesn't. It
It
doesn't even
doesn't
touch the
fix the
budget.
budget. And so
I mean, even look in what it says into the article. Where does the money go? 90% of the revenue would be sent to the U.S. Treasury, right?
right.
5% would go to local governments. 5% would go to deferred maintenance on public lands in the state where the sale occurred. The bill's proponents anticipate raising $5 to $10 billion through the sales process, yet hardly any of that money would be reinvested in the land or the users who rely on it. I love this line. This is a raw deal for the people who care for, work on, or recreate on public lands. It's absolutely true. That money would be lost in the abyss. It would not go to the national debt. It would not go to create affordable housing. The common person would not benefit from this being approved in this legislation in any way, shape, or form. There is no benefit to a working man like myself or you or your rich lawyer next door. There is no benefit. There's no benefit to us. It's a loss of access, loss of habitat, loss of economic activity, and it creates a bad precedent moving forward. Again, I'm regurgitating a lot of what's in this article,
Right.
and this article, I think it really nailed it. And you know, I live in Montana, so this bill technically doesn't really affect me on a day-to-day basis, but in the grand scheme of things, go back to where it says it creates a precedent. It absolutely affects us. So it doesn't matter if you're just in Montana or if you're in Florida. I have clients that come and hunt here from the East Coast all the time. And so absolutely it affects everybody.
Yep.
And so what can we do to help? What does Todd say? By the way, I love getting you on, Todd, because you are fearless when it comes to talking about this kind of stuff. You've got the information, and I love the way that you're just fearless about talking to. You don't care if you sound like a conspiracy theorist, because
Well, I appreciate that, Jim. It's you know, we're blessed here to have an awesome team at Eastmans, yourself included. And, you know, back to the mission statement of Eastmans is to educate and entertain, you know, in a nutshell. And I feel like this piece that David Willms wrote is to educate. It 100% is to educate. And whether or not you agree with this sale or disagree with this sale, it's to educate. So now folks have more information which they can base opinions upon.
Absolutely.
If people, and I would highly urge you, if people listening to this are opposed to this idea, you know, say there's somebody in Florida that doesn't have any public land whatsoever other than Everglades National Park to go enjoy, but they want to come to Wyoming someday and hunt antelope on a DIY public land hunt, that opportunity goes away. Your opportunity to come out and fish a trout stream or do anything but take a drive through Yellowstone goes away. And so, not to mention the folks that live there, but if this hits a nerve with you, contact your senators, contact your congresspeople, and more importantly, reach out to the Republican Party in your local area. They are the ones that have a direct line to these folks. Because,
that's a good idea.
Here's the thing. Like I said, both my senators and my congressmen have turned off public comment on their social media channels. They've turned it off, which tells me they're getting a lot of blowback on this, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But so
they need more.
For all intents and purposes, they're unreachable, right? And you're going to get the same thing. They're going to get another email on their website that some staffer is going to read and may or may not relay to them. But when you reach out to your local Republican Party and say, this is not a good idea, remember that we have primaries coming up. For example, the state of Wyoming primaried Elizabeth Cheney and replaced her with Harriet Hageman because Liz Cheney lost the faith of her constituency. Well, things like this are the things that lose faith, that lose support of constituencies. And how you make that known, how you make your displeasure known, is by contacting the local party, because they have a direct line to senators. They have a direct line to congressmen and saying, man, we're getting a lot of blowback on this. A lot of blowback. And you guys this needs to be discussed. This language needs to be taken out.
Yeah.
Now the good thing is there's a lot of time yet. They're hashing all this stuff out. We've got time. Like I said, if this language passes the Senate, it's got to go back to the House to get voted on again.
Yep.
And this is also something, Jim, that as a hunter and an angler, primarily, those are my primary uses on public land. I hunt and I fish. Yep. We hike it, we camp on it too, but those are the big ones. There's just as much skin in the game for people who don't hunt and fish, and maybe on the opposite side of the political spectrum of you and I. And I'm not talking about, Humane Society of the United States that wants to end all hunting. I'm talking about like folks that love animals, folks that love wild places, but don't necessarily like hunting all that much. Well, guess what? This is an opportunity for us to say, we don't agree on everything, but we agree on this.
Mm-hmm.
We could work together on some of this stuff, and for the greater good, because this is bigger than all of us. And so, man, how can we put our heads together? But I do think, and I've done it, reached out to the state of Wyoming Republican Party and said, here's the deal. This isn't great. We don't like this. Please relay this information. I think as many avenues as you can, and you can find this information in a Google search in about 30 seconds.
2 seconds. I just found Tim Sheehy's email address in 2 seconds just to show that I can do that. Now I can send him an email.
There you go.
And say, hey, we oppose this. And I think everybody needs to do that. Call your county commissioners, your legislators, any elected officials that because like what David talks about in this article, they might have an ear of that elected senator.
Yes.
So like maybe your county commissioner is buddies with your senator.
There you go.
And so call those guys, call your senators, spread the word. I'm just kind of reading off the article here to kind of help people understand. There's a few things. Social media. I want to talk about the social media thing. Make videos, make reels, make posts, and create a little bit of ruckus. Try to keep the emotion out of it, but try to raise some awareness as to what the transfer of public lands. You guys listening, most of you listening are all hunters, right?
Well, let me stop you there for a second, Jim.
Okay, go ahead.
When you use the word transfer, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about specifically the language in the bill is disposal.
Very true.
Disposal.
So, my bad.
If it's no, man, it's okay. I just want to call that out because there's a huge difference between disposal and transfer.
Yep.
Disposal means it's gone. Transfer
as
means
soon as practicable.
There you go.
That's always
There you go.
disposing of. So the language is Secretary of Agriculture to begin disposing of as soon as practicable after bill passage, and every 60 days after that, not less than 0.5 and not more than 0.75%. So absolutely, Todd, thanks for calling me out on that. This is not land transfer. This is the disposal of public lands, which means we will never get it back. And for all these folks out there talking about these no kings protests, the way to get a king is to have to ask the king to hunt his deer. And that's what this will lead to, just like our friends in Europe. I have a good buddy over in England, and he always comments on everything that he was on the show a couple of years ago. And let me tell you, this guy has gone through the ringer with this. He can't even run hounds to hunt anymore because he allowed this kind of stuff. Well, he didn't allow. He fought it.
Right.
Anyway, and I'll get off that topic. But the point is we do need to spread the word, create awareness to what the disposal of these public lands may bring. And again, we agree with those protesters, man. I don't want kings. I don't want kings, and I don't want to ask the king to hunt us deer. I like the fact that as a citizen, I own the land and I own the animals, and through our management system, I can go hunt where I want on those public lands, and the state manages the animals, but the federal government in a trust manages that land for us. And this is like, in my opinion, the disposal of public lands is theft. That is my opinion, and I think that anybody who hunts public land should hold that same opinion, because that is theft. They are trying to steal your lands so that some corporation can own them and build a freaking ski resort or a housing development that won't be affordable, or a what did it say up here? I like the way David put it in this.
The thing I like the most about David's blog is that he stays just presenting facts, and there's no hyperbole in it. There's no emotion in it. And David is invested in this on our side of the fight for sure. But he was this is what's going on. This is what we need to do. Because like you said earlier, I get fired up about this. You get fired up about this.
I do, man.
Rightfully so. But
if I wrote a blog article for you,
I know
I'd be calling Mike Lee names. It'd be all,
right.
But
and at the end of the day, that doesn't serve us well.
No,
and our messaging to our elected officials needs to be honest and blunt and forceful, but not rude and not threatening.
Exactly.
Because that's the fastest way to get somebody to not listen to you.
Yep.
Is you start yelling. Your kids probably do the same thing. I get way better communication out of my kids when I'm calm and I can address the situation calmly and to the point with facts, way better than if I'm yelling. Now, if they're about ready to run out in the street, I'm going to yell.
You're yelling. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's different.
Yeah.
So when you do send these messages, when you do make phone calls and communicate, be kind, but be direct and be blunt and forceful. But you can do that and be kind at the same time.
And understand that they are using the folks that are trying to sell this. They are using some really powerful language to make you kind of cater or appeal to the compassionate side of being a human. We need affordable housing. But the bill itself, the language doesn't specifically say anything about affordability. It doesn't. That's not what the goal is. That's not what the objective is.
Fair market value.
Fair market value. So don't fall for some of the schemes of selling this to, this compassionate thing of these folks that don't have affordable housing and whatnot. That is just not what this will end up being.
Because
we know this.
Yes, because if we look at the laws that are on the books already, there's an avenue for that. Mm-hmm. There's an avenue for that where we can look and say,
already exists.
Salt Lake, there's a big, huge chunk of BLM ground that's outside of the city limits that is perfect for development, perfect for putting affordable housing on, because you do have a problem and that we can address it. Okay, then let's take a look at that. It needs to go through public comment. Maybe that is the best use for that land. But I can tell you what, the Absaroka front between Cody and the Montana state line that's not the best use for that land. The best use for that land is to remain wild, to have it managed properly, to have the wildlife live there, keep living there, to have the ranchers that are running cattle on it right now and paying a grazing lease to continue that, which, we keep getting back to that. And there is language in this bill that talks about exemptions, and anything with a grazing lease on it would be exempted. So there is that. But point is, what they're looking at, whether those maps are misinformation or not, they're eye-opening, because what it does is it shows you this is what, even if they're not true right now, it shows you what could be if this passes. And it's like, holy smokes, man. I'm looking at all of the surrounding area where I live would be up on the chopping block for sale and disposal. And from the mountains to the desert floor. I mean, all of it. And it's like, woof. It's scary. It's crazy. We need to comment. We need to raise awareness about this. Like I said, man, it's easy to get fired up and lose your focus about it. And that's what we can't do. We need to be passionate. We need to stand up and say no, but we also have to do it in a way where we don't look like jerks, like clowns doing it.
And it doesn't take much for me to look like a clown there, Todd. So
me neither.
Definitely, absolutely. So here's what I would ask for those of you listening. I would ask everybody in this audience, if this is important to you, if public lands is important to you, commit to sending 3 emails to 3 different, whether it's a senator, congressman, legislature, commissioner, whatever. Commit to sending 3 emails this week. That's not asking a lot. We're talking about less than 20 minutes of your time to send 3 different emails. I definitely. Oh, and by the way, we need to give credit where credit is due. Representative Zinke, Republican Montana, Downing, Republican Montana, and Simpson, Republican in Idaho. They support us. They support not disposing of this. I almost said transferring, disposing of this public land. So credit where credit is due. We appreciate those guys. I don't know exactly where some of these other senators and legislatures stand. I'm working on kind of finding that out right now. But I know the new senator from Montana, he is, for my district has been in favor of public land in the past. Publicly, I don't know, enough about him. So we're going to find out. But anyway, that's what I would ask for everybody listening. Commit to sending 3 emails, make 1 phone call, and make 1 social media post. All of this, guys, can take place in less than 30 minutes. If we all do that, 3 emails, 1 phone call, and 1 social media post. And your social media post could be super easy. Share the Eastmans blog on this. The blog is called, let me go back to the top here. Oops. What do we name it? What did we name this?
This blog is called 3 Million Acres for Sale.
Yeah, 3 million acres for sale. That totally counts. Share that. And you don't even have to say anything, or you could just put something simple at the top of your post. Hey, so everybody's aware. I'm opposed to this. Where to use fall on it. Whatever you want to do. But share 1 social media post, make 1 phone call, and send 3 emails. I'm gonna double, triple, quadruple that. But I know it's very difficult to ask everybody because we just never seem to make a lot of progress or headway when it comes to hunters and anglers and defending this stuff. But we need you guys. We need you guys to do that if this is important to you at all. Todd, anything else you want to add to that before we wrap this up?
I would just encourage people to do exactly what you just said. It doesn't take a lot of time. And if we don't advocate for this now, if we don't take a stand for public lands now, it will be gone. It will be that rug will be yanked out from under us, And yeah, Montana might be exempt now.
It won't be next year.
What about in 4 years?
Yeah.
What about this? And you guys got to remember something as well when you're, and again, these are elected officials. They are your representatives. They represent your voice in Washington. And if you don't speak up, then they can literally say, well, we didn't hear anything from our constituency on this.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We had a mandate in November in 2024 to straighten things out, to change things. And that's what we're doing. Yep, you are, but not all change is good. No, we don't want to talk about blanket legislation, blanket change. And so you need to stand up. You need to have a voice so they can hear you. And you need to remind them that they're elected and they can be unelected very easily.
Exactly. And, I know there's, for any of you listening in Utah, it's not like I dislike Mike Lee. There's a lot of things Mike Lee does that I agree with, but I'm telling you, he is wrong on the public land issue. And he just is. And there's a lot of Utah legislators that are wrong on the public land issue. That guy I had on a show a couple years ago running for governor of Idaho, what's his name? I'm totally drawing a blank on his name, but everybody knows him. His family's been involved in BLM stuff and shenanigans for a long time. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on his name, but I disagreed with him on this public land issue because he kind of had the same stance, and that doesn't mean I disliked him. But we have to step this game up, and so thank you guys. I hope you do commit to again, just to cover that again. 3 emails, 1 phone call, 1 social media post. Come on, we could do it.
Absolutely, we could
fight
do it.
This bad boy. So
absolutely, it's funny because I feel like the sentiment behind this thing is, anti-federal government, local control, which most of the time I'm for smaller,
Me too, man.
Smaller government,
Me too.
More local control. But when it comes to this, I don't think it's the right move right now, Jim. I really don't.
The problem, Todd, is it's the nature of this game that there is no such thing as publicly accessible, locally controlled land.
Right.
Yes, sure. In Montana and other states, there's a couple of state land tracts that you can go hunt on and whatever. But on a massive scale, states are not set up for this. They will have to sell that land to generate revenue, and it'll end up either in the hands of the Chinese or the Wilkes brothers, the oil tycoons out of Texas, or those are the kind of factions that will own this land that you enjoy right now, that you've been hunting on the last several years. So I just want people to be aware, and I hope another key takeaway is local management does not equate to better management. That is not always the case. Sometimes it is. But I tell you what, working with these school districts the last 10 years, my faith in local control or management is not any better than federal. And so that's just the opinion of a guy who's seen it. And again, we're dragging this out and kind of beating a dead horse at this point, Todd, but thanks everybody for tuning in. I was going to put out a School of September this week, but I felt like this was more important. And so we're going to get back to School of September next week, because I know archery elk season is sneaking up on us, just like this Mike Lee adding this language in this bill selling public land snuck up on us. Elk season's going to be here. So Todd, again, I always love having you on the show, brother. I really appreciate you doing that and jumping on. And I know guys like you have to tie half your brain behind your back just so I can keep up with you. So I appreciate you. And again, thank you to the sponsors: Mystery Ranch, Loophole Optics, Secure It, Barnes Bullets, Phelps Game Calls, Silencer Central, and Browning, specifically that Browning X-Bolt. Thank you. This show wouldn't be possible without those guys. So guys, if you're in the market for any of those products that those companies sell, make sure you're checking them out and giving them a little bit of love. Todd, thanks again. Oh, hey, Eastmans, real quick. I meant to do this at the beginning, but let me pull this back up. The Elite There is a bunch of cool stuff. There is a new promo code you guys can use. It's Huntsman to get 20% off of Eastman's Elite. So what does Elite cover, you may ask? Well,
everything. Everything you hear.
You get Eastman's Tag Hub, the #1 digital scouting, learning, and application tool. You get the Deer Collective, the virtual course on deer hunting. The Elk Collective, that's another virtual course. You get the magazines. Everything is included under Elite, and if you use promo code Huntsman, that is 20% off. I think that makes it well under $100 for all that stuff, and it's worth every single penny. All right, I think that covers it.
Jim, thank you so much for having me on. It was totally my pleasure to come on and do this.
My pleasure as well, Todd. Thanks for carrying. Thanks for Eastman's for carrying. This stuff is near and dear to my heart, and we just, the future of hunting, it depends on all of us, but we couldn't do it without guys like you. So thanks a bunch, and let's just keep in touch and keep rolling along, brother man. Thank you.
Sounds great. Have a good day, Jim.
You too. You made it. That's the end of the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please make sure you're following us on Instagram @TheWesternHuntsman and write us a good review at Apple Podcasts. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Stay Western, and I'll see you on the mountain.